The warning sirens had not sounded in 6 months. Ambassador Yuna took this as a sign of progress, though her advisors called it the calm before another storm. She stood at the tall window of the diplomatic center on Velris 7, watching the distant mountains where fire sometimes lit up the night sky. The Draconar were out there, waiting, watching, and burning anything that came too close. 3 years. 3 long years since the dragon-like aliens had surrounded the human colony and demanded something that no translator could properly explain. 3 years of failed talks, burning ships, and growing fear among the 40,000 humans trapped on this distant world. Yuna pressed her hand against the cold glass. She was 42 years old, and she had spent 20 of those years learning how to make peace between angry people. She had ended conflicts on Mars, she had calmed riots on the space stations orbiting Jupiter, but the Draconar were not people, they were something else entirely. The door behind her opened, and her assistant Dowan walked in with a tablet in his hands. He was young, barely 25, with tired eyes that showed he had not slept well in months. "The council wants your report," Dowan said quietly. "Tell them what I always tell them," Yuna replied without turning around. "We are trying. We are always trying. They want more than that this time. Earth is asking questions. They want to know why we cannot make peace with creatures that breathe fire." Yuna finally turned to face him. "Because fire is the least dangerous thing about them, Dowan. Their fire only burns our ships. Their silence burns our hope." The Draconar had appeared on Velris 7 long before humans arrived. The colony was supposed to be built on an empty world, a perfect place for farming and mining, but the surveys had been wrong. Deep in the mountains, in caves that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, the dragons had been sleeping for centuries. When human machines began digging into the earth, the dragons woke up. At first, there was curiosity on both sides. The Draconar were massive creatures, standing 3 meters tall, with scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Their wings could block out the sun when they flew overhead. Their eyes glowed with ancient intelligence. They were not animals. They were a civilization older than human history, but curiosity quickly turned to anger. The dragons claimed that humans had disturbed their sacred grounds. They demanded payment. They demanded respect. They demanded something that their growling, hissing language could only describe as the heart's true weight. Nobody knew what that meant. Yuna had tried everything. She had offered technology. The dragons burned the machines without looking at them. She had offered territory. The dragons laughed, a terrible sound like rocks grinding together. She had offered food, medicine, art, music, and promises of friendship. Each time, the great dragon elder, Vorshan, simply shook his massive head and walked away. "They want something we cannot give," Yuna had told the council 100 times, "because we do not know what it is." The blockade continued. No ship could leave or enter Velris 7 without being attacked. Supply runs had become suicide missions. The colony survived on carefully managed farms and recycled water, but everyone knew that this could not last forever. Yuna walked to her desk and sat down heavily. On the wall behind her hung pictures of every diplomatic mission she had ever completed. Smiling faces, signed treaties, handshakes between former enemies. None of those missions had prepared her for creatures that rejected everything offered to them. "Schedule another meeting," she said to Dowan. "Tell Vorshan I wish to speak again." Dowan hesitated. "Ambassador, the last time you went to their territory, they nearly killed you. The burns on your shoulder have barely healed." Yuna touched her left shoulder without thinking. The dragon fire had come close, a warning shot that had still managed to melt through her protective suit. The medical team had worked for hours to save her arm. "I know the risks," she said, "but what else can I do? Sit here and wait for everyone to starve? Maybe we should fight them," Dowan said quietly. Yuna looked at him sharply. "Fight them? With what? Our colony defense weapons? The dragons have scales that can stop plasma fire. They can fly faster than our shuttles. They breathe flames hot enough to melt steel. And there are thousands of them in those mountains. Dowan. Thousands. Then what do we do? It was the question that haunted her every night. What do you do when your enemy wants something you cannot understand? What do you do when every door you knock on leads to fire and rejection? We keep trying, Yuna said finally. That is all we can do. We keep trying until we find the answer, or until we die trying. Dowan nodded slowly and left the room to send the message. Yuna turned back to the window and watched the sun begin to set over the mountains. Somewhere out there, Vorshan was waiting. The ancient dragon had lived for over 2,000 years, if the translations were correct. He had seen species rise and fall. He had watched empires crumble to dust. What could humans possibly offer to a creature who had seen everything? The answer came 3 days later, though not in any way Yuna could have expected. It came not from diplomats or soldiers or scientists. It came from a small boy with messy hair and a piece of candy in his pocket. But that night, as Yuna prepared for another meeting with creatures who wanted to see her burn, she had no way of knowing that salvation was already on its way. It was traveling on a refugee ship called the Bright Hope, carrying 300 civilians fleeing from a destroyed mining station on the other side of the planet. Among those civilians was a family of 3. A pilot named Ji-hoon, his wife Mira, and their 6-year-old son Taeho. They were ordinary people with ordinary lives, and they had no idea that their ship was about to crash into the middle of dragon territory. They had no idea that little Taeho, with his bright smile and his love for strawberry candy, was about to change the fate of 2 species forever. The Bright Hope launched into the night sky, its engines struggling against the weight of desperate passengers. Ji-hoon sat in the pilot seat, his hands steady on the controls even though his heart was pounding. Behind him, in the crowded passenger cabin, Mira held Taeho close and told him stories to keep him calm. "Where are we going, Mama?" Taeho asked. "Somewhere safe," Mira promised. "Somewhere the dragons cannot find us." But she was wrong. The dragons could find anyone on Velris 7, and the Bright Hope was flying straight toward them. Yuna received the distress signal 20 minutes later. A civilian ship was going down in Sector 7. Dragon territory. No rescue was possible. She closed her eyes and added 300 more names to the list of people she had failed to save. She did not know that among those names was the one person who could finally bring peace. A little boy who understood something that all the ambassadors and generals and scientists had missed. Sometimes the greatest gift is the one that costs you the most to give. The Bright Hope was not a lucky ship. It was old, tired, and held together by repairs that should have been replaced years ago. But when the mining station exploded and fire spread across the eastern settlements, there was no time to be picky about transportation. 300 people climbed aboard and prayed that the engines would hold. Ji-hoon had been a pilot for 15 years. He knew every sound his ship could make, every shake and rattle that meant something was wrong. So when the left engine began to cough and sputter halfway through the flight, he knew they were in trouble. "Mira," he called back to the passenger cabin, keeping his voice calm. "Bring Taeho to the front. Strap in tight." Mira did not ask questions. She had been married to a pilot long enough to know when he was worried. She took Taeho's small hand and led him through the crowded cabin, stepping over sleeping passengers and crying children. "Are we going to fall, Mama?" Taeho asked. He was small for his age, with round cheeks and eyes that always seemed to be curious about everything. "No, baby. Papa just wants us close to him. That is all." But Mira saw the mountains outside the window. She saw the dark shapes moving between the peaks. Dragons. They were flying into dragon territory. Ji-hoon turned to look at his family as they strapped into the seats behind him. Taeho was clutching something in his small fist. It was a piece of strawberry candy, wrapped in bright red paper. The boy had been carrying it for weeks, saving it for a special day. "Why do you not eat that candy?" Ji-hoon asked, trying to distract his son from the shaking ship. "I am saving it," Taeho said seriously. "For when I really need something sweet." Ji-hoon smiled despite everything. His son had such a pure heart. In a world full of fire and fear, Taeho still believed in saving good things for good moments. The engine died completely 3 minutes later. The Bright Hope tilted sharply to the left, and screams filled the cabin. Ji-hoon fought with the controls, trying to level the ship, trying to find somewhere safe to land. But there was nowhere safe in dragon territory. Every valley was watched. Every mountain held caves full of ancient creatures. "Hold on!" Ji-hoon shouted. "Everyone hold on!" The ground came up fast. Ji-hoon managed to pull the nose up at the last moment, turning a deadly crash into a rough landing that threw everyone from their seats. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. And then, silence. Ji-hoon woke up to the sound of his son crying. That sound, more than anything else, told him he was still alive. Dead men could not hear their children cry. "Taeho? Mira? We are here." Mira's voice came from somewhere behind him. "We are okay." Taeho bumped his head. "But he is okay." Ji-hoon pulled himself from the ruined pilot seat and looked around. The front of the ship was destroyed. The passenger cabin behind them was filled with smoke and moaning people. Some were getting up slowly. Others were not moving at all. "We need to get everyone out," Ji-hoon said. "The fuel tanks might explode." The next hour was chaos. Survivors helped pull the injured from the wreckage. They carried the wounded to a clearing away from the ship. They counted heads and realized that of 300 passengers, only 87 had survived. The sun was setting when they finally stopped moving. 87 people stood in a field, surrounded by mountains, with no food, no supplies, and no way to call for help. The communication equipment had been destroyed in the crash. "Where are we?" someone asked. Ji-hoon looked at the mountains and felt his heart sink. Sector 7. Deep in dragon territory. Fear spread through the group like cold water. Everyone knew what that meant. The dragons did not allow humans in their territory. The few who had tried to explore these mountains had never returned. "We need to hide," said an old man named Byung-ho. "Find caves. Stay quiet. Maybe they will not notice us." "They will notice us," said a young woman named Somin. "They always notice." As the adults argued about what to do, Taeho sat on a rock and watched the sky. The stars were coming out, beautiful and bright. He had never seen so many stars before. On the mining station, the lights had always been too bright to see the sky properly. "Look, Mama," he said, pointing up. "So many lights." Mira sat down next to him and put her arm around his small shoulders. She was trying not to cry. They had escaped one disaster, only to land in another. Her husband was trying to organize the survivors, but she could see the hopelessness in his eyes. "They are very pretty," she said softly. Taeho pulled out his strawberry candy and looked at it. The wrapper was a little dirty now, but the candy inside was still good. He thought about eating it. This seemed like a moment when he really needed something sweet. But then he saw his mother's face, and he put the candy back in his pocket. He would save it a little longer. Maybe someone else would need something sweet more than he did. The dragons came just before midnight. They did not attack. They simply landed on the mountains surrounding the crash site and watched with glowing eyes. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Their scales reflecting the starlight like dark mirrors. The survivors huddled together in terror. Some prayed. Some cried. Some simply stared at the massive creatures and waited for death to come. But the dragons did not attack. They only watched. Morning came slowly. The survivors had not slept. How could they? With those glowing eyes watching their every move. But as the sun rose over the mountains, something changed. The dragons began to leave, flying away one by one, until only a few remained on the nearest peak. "Why did they not kill us?" Salmon whispered. "Maybe they are waiting for something," Byung-ho said. Ji-hoon organized the survivors into groups. Some would search the wreckage for supplies, others would look for water. Everyone would stay close together and stay quiet. Maybe, somehow, a rescue ship would come. Maybe the colony had seen them go down, but deep down, everyone knew that no rescue was coming. The colony did not have ships that could fly into dragon territory. They were on their own. Taeho spent the day helping his mother collect rainwater from the wreckage. He worked hard, carrying small containers back and forth, never complaining even though he was tired and hungry. The other survivors noticed the brave little boy and smiled sadly at him. "You are very strong," an old woman told him. "My papa says that helping others makes you stronger," Tejo replied. That night, around a small fire made from broken pieces of the ship, the survivors shared what little food they had found. There was not enough for everyone, so the adults gave their portions to the children. Tejo ate his small meal slowly, making it last as long as possible. Then he saw something that made his heart hurt. One of the dragons had come closer during the night. It sat on a rock just 50 meters away, watching the fire with curious eyes. It was smaller than the others, young maybe, and it looked alone. Everyone else was afraid of the dragon. They moved away from its side of the camp, keeping the fire between them and the creature. But Tejo felt something different. The dragon did not look angry to him. It looked sad. It looked lonely. He thought about his candy again. He had been saving it for when he really needed something sweet. But looking at that lonely dragon, he began to wonder if maybe he was not the one who needed sweetness most. Maybe the dragons needed something sweet too. Maybe they had been waiting for something sweet for a very long time. Tejo did not know that this simple thought would change everything. He did not know that his small act of kindness was about to rewrite the history of two species. He only knew that the dragon looked sad, and sad creatures deserved something good. The third day in dragon territory began with silence. The survivors had learned to move quietly, speak softly, and never look directly at the creatures watching from the mountains. Fear had become their constant companion, sitting beside them at every meal, sleeping next to them at night. But Tejo was not afraid. This confused his parents greatly. "Stay close to me," Mira told him for the 100th time. "Do not wander off." "I will not wander far," Tejo promised. But his eyes kept drifting to the young dragon that sat alone on the rocks. It had not moved in 2 days. It just sat there, watching the humans with eyes that looked more curious than hungry. Jihoon was busy organizing a scouting party. They needed to find food. The supplies from the crash had run out, and hungry children were starting to cry. Several men volunteered to search the nearby forest, even though it meant getting closer to dragon territory. "Be careful," Jihoon told them. "If you see any dragons, do not run. Just walk away slowly." The men nodded and left, moving quietly between the trees. Jihoon watched them go, with worry in his heart. He was responsible for these people now. Every death would be his failure. Tejo tugged at his father's sleeve. "Papa, why do the dragons watch us but not hurt us?" Jihoon looked down at his son and tried to smile. "I do not know, Tejo. Maybe they are deciding what to do with us. Maybe they are lonely," Tejo said. Jihoon did not know what to say to that. How could dragons be lonely? They had each other. They had their mountains and caves and fire. What could they possibly be missing? But Tejo's simple words stayed in his mind all day. Lonely. What if the dragons were not angry at humans? What if they were just lonely? That afternoon, something happened that would be talked about for generations. Tejo slipped away from his mother while she was helping bandage an injured man. He walked toward the young dragon on the rocks, his small feet making soft sounds on the grass. Salmon saw him first. "The boy." Someone stopped the boy, but it was too late. Tejo was already halfway to the dragon, walking with the fearless confidence that only children have. By the time Mira turned around and screamed his name, her son was standing directly in front of a creature that could kill him with a single breath. The young dragon lowered its massive head to look at Tejo. Its eyes were golden, with black slits in the center, and they studied the small human with intense curiosity. Steam rose from its nostrils with each breath. Everyone held still. No one dared to move or speak. Even the wind seemed to stop blowing. Tejo looked up at the dragon without fear. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his strawberry candy. The red wrapper was dirty and wrinkled from being carried for so long, but the candy inside was still perfect, still sweet, still precious. "Hello," Tejo said in his small voice. "You look sad. I have been saving this candy for a special day, but I think you need something sweet more than I do." He held out the candy with both hands, offering it to the dragon like a gift to a king. The young dragon did not move. It stared at the candy, then at the boy. then back at the candy. Something changed in its golden eyes. The coldness melted away, replaced by something that looked almost like wonder. Then, a sound came from the mountains. A deep, rumbling sound that made the ground shake. More dragons were coming, drawn by the scene below. They landed in a circle around Taeho, and the young dragon, their massive bodies blocking out the sun. Mira fell to her knees, crying. Ji-hoon tried to run to his son, but strong hands held him back. There was nothing anyone could do. The dragons had surrounded the boy. The largest dragon pushed through the circle. It was Vor-shan, the ancient elder that Ambassador Yuna had tried so many times to negotiate with. His scales were darker than the others, almost black, and scars covered his body from centuries of battles. He moved slowly, each step deliberate, until he stood directly in front of Taeho. The boy was so small compared to the elder. He barely reached Vor-shan's knee. But he did not run. He did not cry. He simply looked up at the ancient dragon and held out his candy again. "This is for you," Taeho said. "It is my favorite candy. Strawberry. Very sweet." Vor-shan stared at the child for a long moment. Then he spoke, his voice like thunder rolling through valleys. "Do you know what you are offering, small one?" Taeho nodded seriously. "My candy. It is the last piece I have. My grandmother gave it to me before we left Earth. I was saving it for when I really needed something sweet." He paused and smiled. "But you look like you need it more." The elder dragon was silent. Around him, the other dragons shifted and murmured in their strange language. Something was happening. Something important. "You offer us your treasure," Vor-shan said slowly. "Your precious thing. And you expect nothing in return?" Taeho shook his head. "Gifts do not need returns. That is what makes them gifts. My mama taught me that." A sound came from the dragons then. It was not a roar or a growl. It was something softer, almost like a sigh. Vor-shan lowered his great head until his eye was level with Taeho's face. "For 300 years, the elder said, your kind has come to us with offerings, technology, territory, resources. Always they offer things that cost them nothing. Always they expect something in return. They call these gifts, but they are only trades." Taeho listened carefully, not understanding everything but trying his best. "We asked for the heart's true weight," Vor-shan continued. "We asked for a gift that meant something. A sacrifice freely given. And for 300 years, no human understood." The ancient dragon looked at the small candy in Taeho's hands. It was worth nothing by human standards. A tiny piece of sugar wrapped in paper. But to this small boy, it was everything. His last connection to his grandmother. His last piece of earth. His most treasured possession. And he was offering it freely, expecting nothing in return. "You understand," Vor-shan said softly. "You, small human, understand what all your ambassadors and generals could not." Taeho smiled. "Does that mean you will take my candy?" The great dragon made a sound that might have been a laugh. Then, very gently, he took the candy from Taeho's hands. His claws were bigger than the boy's entire body, but he handled the tiny gift with extreme care. "I will treasure this," Vor-shan said. "More than gold. More than territory. More than all the technology your kind has offered." The other dragons began to move back, opening the circle. Mira ran to her son and scooped him up in her arms, crying and laughing at the same time. Ji-hoon was right behind her, wrapping both of them in his arms. Vor-shan watched the family with ancient eyes. For the first time in 300 years, he felt something he had forgotten existed. "Hope. Tell your ambassador," the elder said to Ji-hoon. "Tell her that the dragons wish to speak again, not about trades, about true peace." Then the dragons took to the sky, leaving behind a group of stunned survivors and one small boy who did not understand why everyone was crying. "Mama, why are you sad?" Taeho asked. "I gave away my candy. But I am not sad about it." Mira held her son close and smiled through her tears. Taeho did not understand. But that was okay. He had made the dragon smile. That was enough for him. In the mountains, Vorshan looked at the small candy in his claw. Such a tiny thing. Such a powerful gift. He carefully unwrapped it and held the pink sweet up to the light. Then he ate it, tasting strawberry for the first time in his 2,000 years of life. It was the sweetest thing he had ever known. The message reached Ambassador Yuna at sunset. A rescue team had finally managed to reach the crash site of the Bright Hope, expecting to find bodies and wreckage. Instead, they found 87 survivors sitting peacefully in a field, surrounded by dragon claw marks in the earth, but completely unharmed. "They want to talk," the rescue team leader reported, his voice shaking with disbelief. "The dragons. They asked for you personally." Yuna put down her cup of tea with trembling hands. "That is not possible. Vorshan has refused every meeting for the past 6 months. He is not refusing now. And, Ambassador, there is something else. Something strange happened out there. Something involving a child." 3 hours later, Yuna's shuttle landed at the crash site. The survivors had been given food and medicine, but most of them had refused to leave yet. They wanted to see what would happen next. Ji-hun met the ambassador as she stepped off the shuttle. His face was tired, but his eyes held something new. "Hope, tell me everything," Yuna said. So Ji-hun told her about the crash, the watching dragons, and his son's impossible act of bravery. He told her about the candy, the ancient elder, and the words that Vorshan had spoken before flying away. "The heart's true weight," Yuna repeated slowly. "For 3 years I have been trying to understand what that means." "My son understood," Ji-hun said softly. "A 6-year-old boy understood what none of us could see." Yuna looked across the field to where Taeho was playing with some of the other children. He was laughing, chasing butterflies, acting like nothing special had happened. She walked over to him slowly, not wanting to scare him. "Hello, Taeho," she said, kneeling down to his level. "My name is Yuna. Can we talk?" Taeho stopped chasing butterflies and looked at her with curious eyes. "Are you the lady who talks to dragons?" "I try to talk to them, but they never wanted to listen to me." "Maybe you were not giving them what they wanted," Taeho said simply. Yuna smiled sadly. "I gave them many things. Technology worth millions. Land that could feed thousands. Medicine that could help their sick. They rejected everything." Taeho thought about this for a moment. Then he said something that made Yuna's heart stop. "Did those things make you sad to give them away?" The question hung in the air like morning mist. Yuna opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. The technology had been old. Things the colony no longer needed. The land had been areas they were not using anyway. The medicine was extra supplies they could easily replace. She had never offered anything that hurt to give. She had never offered anything precious. "No," she admitted quietly. "They did not make me sad." Taeho nodded wisely, far wiser than any 6-year-old should be. "My candy made me sad to give away. But I gave it anyway, because the dragon looked sadder than me. That is what gifts are supposed to be. Right? Things that cost something?" Before Yuna could respond, a shadow fell over them. She looked up and felt her blood freeze. Vorshan was descending from the sky, his massive wings creating winds that bent the grass flat. The survivors scattered in fear, but Yuna forced herself to stand still. She had faced this dragon many times. She would not run now. Vorshan landed gently. Far more gently than she had ever seen him land before. His ancient eyes found Taeho immediately, and something that looked almost like warmth entered his gaze. "Small one," the elder said. "You are still here." Taeho waved at the dragon like he was greeting an old friend. "Hello again. Did you like my candy?" "It was the sweetest thing I have ever tasted," Vorshan replied. Then, he turned to Yuna, and his expression became more serious. "Ambassador, we have much to discuss." Yuna bowed her head respectfully. "I am ready to listen, Elder Vorshan. First, you must understand why we rejected your offerings." The dragon sat back on his haunches, making himself slightly less intimidating. "The Draconar are an old species. We were traveling between stars when your ancestors were still learning to make fire. We have seen many things, Ambassador. We have seen empires rise and fall. We have watched species destroy themselves with greed. The other survivors were listening now, drawn by the dragon's voice. Even the children had stopped playing to watch. Long ago, Vorshan continued, we learned that the only thing of true value in this universe is sacrifice. Not trade, not exchange. True sacrifice. Giving something precious, expecting nothing in return. But we offered you valuable things, Yuna said carefully. You offered us things that cost you nothing, Vorshan replied. Old machines you no longer needed. Land you were not using. Extra medicine from your storage rooms. These were not gifts. They were garbage wrapped in pretty words. The truth of his words hit Yuna like a physical blow. She had thought she was being generous, but she had only been giving away things that did not matter to her. We asked for the heart's true weight because we wanted to know if your species could understand sacrifice, the elder said. We wanted to know if humans were capable of giving without expecting to receive. For 3 years, you showed us that you were not. Vorshan turned to look at Taeho, and his voice softened. Then this small human walked up to one of our young ones and offered his most precious possession, a tiny candy worth nothing to your economy. But it was everything to him. His last piece of home, his grandmother's gift, his treasure. Taeho blushed a little at all the attention. He gave it freely, Vorshan said, expecting nothing, hoping only to make a sad creature happy. In that moment, he showed us something we had forgotten existed in the universe. What? Yuna asked softly. Innocence, the elder answered. Pure, simple goodness. The kind that does not calculate costs and benefits. The kind that gives because giving is right, not because it is useful. Silence fell over the field. The sun was setting again, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Somewhere in the distance, other dragons were circling, watching, waiting. We have spent 300 years judging your species by your leaders, Vorshan said. By your diplomats and generals and merchants. We forgot that every species has children. And children often know truths that adults forget. Yuna felt tears forming in her eyes, but she forced herself to speak. Then you will make peace with us? Because of one child's gift? Vorshan shook his great head slowly. One gift is not enough to erase 3 years of insults. But it is enough to open a door. It is enough to make us willing to try again. The elder dragon rose to his full height, and his voice carried across the field like rolling thunder. We will negotiate, Ambassador. But not for technology or territory. We will negotiate for understanding. We want to learn about your children. We want to know how humans teach kindness to their young. We want to understand why this small boy knew something that all your wise adults did not. Yuna looked at Taeho, who was yawning and leaning against his mother's leg. A tired little boy who had no idea how much he had just changed. We would be honored to teach you, Yuna said. And perhaps you could teach us as well. Teach us what true sacrifice means. Vorshan nodded slowly. Then let us begin. Tomorrow, at sunrise. Bring the child. He has much to teach us all. The dragon spread his wings and took to the sky, leaving behind a group of humans who finally understood what they had been missing all along. Not bigger gifts, not better technology. Just a simple truth that a 6-year-old boy had known all along. The greatest gifts are the ones that hurt to give away. 6 months passed on Velris 7, and the world had changed in ways that no one could have predicted. The blockade was gone. Ships flew freely between the colony and Earth, carrying supplies, visitors, and news of the impossible peace that a small boy had created. Taeho did not understand why everyone kept calling him a hero. He had just given away his candy. That did not seem very heroic to him, but to the 40,000 humans on Velris 7, and to the millions watching from Earth, the small boy had become a symbol. News programs told his story. Schools named themselves after him. Children everywhere started collecting candy to share with those who looked sad. The candy piece, they called it. A silly name, Taeho thought. But adults liked naming things. The negotiations between humans and Draconar had gone slowly at first. Old anger does not disappear overnight. But Vorshan had kept his word. He listened. He asked questions. He tried to understand. And Ambassador Yuna had changed her approach completely. Instead of offering things that did not matter, she started asking what the dragons truly needed. Instead of calculating benefits, she started simply giving. The first real gift came 3 weeks after Teho's candy offering. A human doctor named Unji volunteered to enter the dragon caves and help heal their sick. She knew she might never return. She went anyway. The dragons were stunned. No human had ever risked their life for a Draconar. When Unji returned safely after saving the life of a young dragon with an infected wound, Vorshan himself came to thank her. "You gave your time and your safety," the elder said. "You expected nothing in return." "That is what doctors do," Unji replied simply. "We help those who need helping." More gifts followed. Human teachers came to the dragon caves to share stories of Earth. Dragon storytellers flew to the human colony to share tales of their ancient history. Children from both species began to meet, curious about each other, afraid of nothing. Teho became the unofficial ambassador of these meetings. The dragon children loved him. They would gather around him while he told them about Earth, about snow and oceans and strawberry candy. They would show him their caves, their treasures, their baby siblings still learning to breathe fire. His best friend among the dragons was the young one he had first approached. Her name was Kirith, and she was only 50 years old, which was very young for a dragon. She had been the lonely one sitting on the rocks, watching the humans with curious eyes. "Why did you come to me that day?" Kirith asked him once, her voice rumbling like distant thunder. Teho thought about it carefully. "You looked sad. And when someone looks sad, you should try to make them happy. That is what my grandmother always told me." "Your grandmother sounds wise." "She was. She died before we left Earth. That is why the candy was so special. It was the last thing she gave me." Kirith was quiet for a long moment. Then she lowered her great head until her eye was level with Teho's face. "I am sorry you lost her," the young dragon said. "But I am glad you shared her gift with us. Because of your candy, I found my first friend." Teho hugged the dragon's snout, his small arms barely reaching around the tip of her nose. Kirith made a sound that might have been a laugh, or might have been a purr. The peace negotiations were officially completed on a bright spring morning, exactly 1 year after the crash of the Bright Hope. A ceremony was held in the valley between the human colony and the Dragon Mountains. Thousands of humans attended. Hundreds of dragons flew in circles overhead, their scales catching the sunlight like living rainbows. Ambassador Yuna stood on a platform beside Vorshan. Behind them, a large stone tablet had been carved with the terms of peace, written in both human and Draconar languages. "Today, we end 3 years of fear and anger," Yuna said, her voice carried by speakers across the valley. "Today, we begin a future of friendship and understanding, and we owe this day not to diplomats or generals, but to a small boy with a big heart." The crowd cheered. Somewhere in the front row, Teho buried his face in his mother's shoulder, embarrassed by all the attention. Vorshan spread his wings and spoke in his thundering voice. "The Draconar have learned much from the humans this year. We have learned that size does not determine the weight of a heart. We have learned that the smallest hands can carry the largest gifts. And we have learned that peace begins not with treaties, but with trust." The ancient dragon reached into a pouch hanging from his neck and pulled out something small and carefully wrapped in red paper. It was the candy wrapper that Teho had given him, preserved like a precious artifact. "This wrapper held the sweetest gift I have ever received," Vorshan said. "I will carry it with me until the day I die, to remind me that kindness can come from anywhere, even from a small human boy who just wanted to make a sad dragon smile." Vorshan. Also 70 sips is that. After the ceremony, there was a celebration that lasted for 3 days. Humans and dragons ate together, played together, and told stories together. Children ran between the legs of massive creatures, laughing without fear. Dragons carefully gave rides to brave young humans, flying in slow circles above the valley. Ji-hoon watched his son playing with Kirith and felt tears running down his cheeks. 1 year ago, he had been sure that his family would die in dragon territory. Now his son was best friends with a dragon, and peace had come to their world. Mira took his hand and leaned against his shoulder. "Our boy did something amazing," she said softly. "He just shared his candy," Ji-hoon replied with a smile. "He did not know he was saving the world. Maybe that is why it worked," Mira said. "He did not try to be a hero. He just wanted to be kind." That night, as the celebrations continued, Taeho sat on a hill overlooking the valley with Kirith beside him. The stars were coming out. Thousands of them. Beautiful and bright. "Kirith," Taeho said, "do dragons like candy?" The young dragon thought about this. "We do not need sugar like humans do." But after eating your gift, Vorshan said it was not about the taste. It was about the love. The love? Your candy was filled with your grandmother's love. And with your love for a lonely dragon. That is what made it sweet. Not the sugar. Taeho smiled and pulled something from his pocket. It was a new piece of candy, strawberry flavored, that his mother had gotten from a supply ship. He unwrapped it carefully and broke it in half. "Here," he said, offering one half to Kirith. "This one is filled with my love for my best friend." Kirith took the candy gently and ate it slowly. It was sweet, but the young dragon knew that Taeho was right. The love made it sweeter. "Thank you, small friend," Kirith said. "You have taught me so much." "I have not taught anything," Taeho said, confused. "I just shared my candy." Kirith made that laughing, purring sound again. "Exactly. You just shared. And that is the lesson. Sharing is easy when you love. Your whole species forgot that. We forgot too. But you remembered." Taeho leaned against his friend's warm scales and watched the stars. He still did not completely understand why everyone made such a big deal about his candy. But that was okay. He was happy. Kirith was happy. And the dragons and humans were friends now. Maybe that was all that mattered. In the distance, Vorshan watched the small boy and the young dragon sitting together under the stars. The ancient elder had lived for 2,000 years. He had seen empires and disasters and wars beyond counting. But this moment, this simple scene of two friends sharing candy under the stars, was the most beautiful thing he had ever witnessed. Peace had finally come to Velris 7, and it had all started with a little boy and his beloved candy. Sometimes the universe works in mysterious ways. Sometimes the biggest changes come from the smallest hearts. And sometimes, all it takes to bridge two worlds is a single act of kindness, freely given, expecting nothing in return. Taeho fell asleep against Kirith's warm scales, dreaming of strawberries and stars, and a grandmother who would have been very proud. The war was over. The peace had just begun.